You might ask, why does Ukraine's quiet, stubborn optimism matter? And why is Russia not winning? Because whatever you hear from the comment section, from the YouTube propagandists, Russia is failing. When you read Russian telegram channels or watch Kremlin state TV, you could be forgiven for thinking that Ukraine is on the ropes and Russia is an unstoppable juggernaut. Maps are shaded red, arrows thrust westwards, and the word inevitable is used a lot. Yet, when you step back and look at the facts, rather than the propaganda from the Kremlin, a strikingly different picture emerges. It is one of a Ukraine that has blunted and blooded the world's second largest army, created new military technologies and turned itself into Europe's most experienced fighting force, and of a Russia that is bleeding people, treasure and prestige at a pace it can ill afford. Remember February 2022, Western intelligence expected Kyiv to fall in 3 days. Washington even offered President Zelensky an airlift, and in his now famous reply, "I need ammunition, not a ride," that became symbolic of Ukraine's refusal to die. Instead of decapitating the government, Russia was forced to humiliating retreats around Kyiv, Kharkiv and Kherson, and since then Moscow spent 3 years trying and failing to achieve a single decisive breakthrough. Russia's big 2025 push has consumed perhaps 200,000 to 300,000 soldiers, killed or wounded, and yielded only a thin strip of land, about 0.6% of Ukraine. At this rate, analysts joke it would take Moscow a century and millions more lives to conquer the rest. It's a First World War style grind for mud and rubble, dressed up as a triumph by cartographic trickery. Ukraine has sensibly avoided throwing soldiers at Russian minefields for token villages. Instead, it trades space for lives, forcing Russia to pay ruinous costs for every kilometre. Retired Australian General Mick Ryan compared it to America invading Iraq in 2003 and still holding only 1/5 of the country after 1 million casualties 3 years later. No one could call that victory. Navally, Ukraine has done what no analyst thought possible, sinking the cruiser Moskva, reclaiming Snake Island and pushing the Black Sea Fleet into hiding using cheap, clever drones and missiles. In the air, Russia still doesn't control the skies. Its bomber fleet was mauled in Ukrainian deep strike raids this summer, hence Moscow's turn to terror. Missile and drone attacks on cities, while Ukraine hits oil refineries and air bases hundreds of kilometers inside Russia, disrupting fuel and logistics. Even if on Russian TV there is so much censorship, ordinary Russians wouldn't know what was happening. Ukraine has built a domestic drone industry almost from scratch. Its deep strike campaign has hit over 80 high-value targets in Russia in 2 months. Refineries, depots, airfields. Gas shortages now plague Crimea. Moscow has had to ban fuel exports. This is not just nuisance. It is strangling the Kremlin's war economy. And because Moscow cannot win on the battlefield, it is trying to win in Western minds, whispering that Ukraine is doomed, so Europe and America cut support, yet the facts defy the story. Ukraine remains unconquered, its army is now 1 million strong and battle-hardened, and its society, which Putin once insisted wasn't real, is welded together by shared sacrifice and shared identity, and Putin's core war aim, the destruction of Ukrainian nationhood, is already lost. In fact, Putin has done more to define the Ukrainian nation than almost any other figure in history. For Europe, this matters. If Russia ever tried to lunge beyond Ukraine, the most capable, experienced army available to defend Warsaw or Berlin is not Germany's or France's, but Ukraine's. Supporting Kyiv is not charity, it is insurance. And even Donald Trump, once keen to force concessions, now says Ukraine can fight and win. After hearing from Zelensky, after hearing from King Charles and European leaders, Washington's calculus has shifted because Ukraine is proving something valuable. It can contain Russia without NATO troops on the front. It's not a fairy tale. The war is brutal and far from over. And Ukraine still needs weapons, money, and diplomatic spine from the West. But one thing is settled. Putin has failed to erase Ukraine. The very fact that Ukrainian identity is stronger, not weaker, is a decisive political defeat of Putin's Kremlin. Optimism here is not naive cheerfulness, it is strategic clarity. Believing Russian propaganda is self-fulfilling, seeing the real balance. Russia grinding itself down, Ukraine adapting and surviving. That stiffens Western resolve, or should. It shows that helping Kyiv is not backing a lost cause, but defending Europe's front line against an exhausted, brittle empire. So when trolls flood social media with talk of inevitable Russian victory, remember, maps can lie, casualty figures cannot. Ukraine has already won the war for its own survival and is steadily unraveling Russia's ability to project power. That may not bring a quick peace, but it changes the long game, and it explains why Ukrainians, despite the loss, despite the cost, have reason to be stubbornly, quietly optimistic.